Now that was before, and it was even afterwards. But they were putting the pressure on him, and so eventually down the line, David was doing his comedy in the local comedy clubs, but then he got a phone call again, and he said, called me and told me, he said, "Cuz, they called me again." I said, "Who called you again?" He said, "The executives." And he said, they want to talk to me one more time. They're thinking about the possibility of me doing the Chappelle show and doing it the way that I want to do it. I want to be, he said, because the only reason why I told them when I talked to them the last time that the only way I would do the Chappelle show again would be if I did it my way and it would be set up on my terms. And so I received a phone call and they want to talk to me about it. Well, my antennas went up. I said, "David, now you be careful now," I said, "because they could be saying that." He said, "No, I really think they're serious this time, cuz." He said, "Because made it definite with them that the only way that he said, I told it on Oprah Winfrey show too, that the only way that I would do the Chappelle show again, it would have to be on my terms, my way, and and the money that I make, even if it wasn't 50 million, it would have to go to the people, and but it had to be on my terms." So I said, "Okay, David." I said, "Well, do you trust him?" David said, "Yeah." David said, "Well, I think I can trust him this time." So I said, "Well, David, whatever the situation is, please give me a call." He said, you know that's right, cuz." And so David left. We hung up. I should say we hung up. I have not heard from David, not even today. I have not heard from David. Now, what I think is this, that Neil Brennan is a question mark, 100%. A question mark. I believe that David went there and they discussed once again about the 50 million. And I believe Neil Brennan was somewhere in that office. And then they told, I'm believing that they told David that they wanted him to see something. Just like they did Bernie Mac. Oh, yes, indeed. They took Bernie, let me stop on David for a few minutes. But they showed Bernie Mac the cloning lab. And they showed Bernie Mac the cloning lab. And he went down and he saw how people were being cloned. And when Bernie Mac came back and told Steve Harvey and D.L. Hughley and a few others, and that he saw the cloning lab and that something had to be done to stop that foolishness of what they were doing. Well, Steve Harvey and D.L. Hughley went back and told the top brass of the Illuminati, the dark circle, in a dark circle, and what they did, they killed him. Okay, so now let's go back to David Chappelle. I'm truly believing that they told David they had something they wanted him to see. And they took David to the underground cloning lab. And when they took David down there, I'm believing that before they took David down there, they promised David that they would go along with his deal, with David's deal, to get him to sign the contract. And I'm believing that David, thinking that he would get back on the Chappelle show, working with Comedy Central, that everything was going to be all right. And I'm believing that David signed that contract thinking that. And when he signed that contract, they wanted David to go and look at something else. It could have been maybe telling him that maybe it was a new studio or something of some kind or what have you. But they got David after signing the contract, and then once he signed the contract, they took him someplace else, and the place that they took him to was to the underground lab. And when they got him down there, they cloned David. And when they clone a person, and I want you to do your research, cloning today only takes a couple, maybe to several hours to be cloned. Well, this is what I strongly believe they did to David. They took him to this underground lab. And what they did is smiling in his face and just going along with David so that David would not yield up or fight or this sort of thing. And they cloned him. And once they cloned David Chappelle, then they killed David Chappelle. Okay, and once they killed David Chappelle, that was it. And once they did this, then they had full control of this new Dave Chappelle. They had to clone him. And then once they cloned him, this is what I'm thinking too, that when they cloned him, then they got the clone to sign David's name for not only 50 million, but the 60 million as well. Well, let me say this. I had not heard from David when he was supposed to have met with the executives the second time, and Dave promised me and assured me he would call me to let me know the outcome. I have not heard from David since. When I turned my television on and I saw this man there on some kind of show, and he had one pants leg rolled all the way down and the other one rolled all the way up, and they said this was Dave Chappelle. I said, Dave, who? And I went to the television and I looked and I said, hell no, that ain't no David Chappelle or no Dave Chappelle. No, hell no. And so I got on the cell phone and I called my cousin David. And I called, the phone rang and it rang and it rang. I think it was maybe on the fourth or fifth ring that someone picked up the telephone and said, hello. I said, yeah, let me speak to David. And the person on the other end said, who are you? I said, I'm David Chappelle's cousin. And the phone clicked. It clicked. It went dead. So I called the number right back up again, and the phone rang, and it rang, and it rang. I never got in contact with David. Now, I called David's brother, William. Didn't get an answer from him either. I don't know what had happened, but I didn't get an answer from him. But when I saw this man on television with one pants leg all the way down and the other pants leg rolled up, I knew damn well that was not my cousin, not my Uncle William's son. Hell no. And when this new Dave had his pants leg rolled up, that was a symbol of the Masons. Now, David Chappelle was a practicing Muslim. My cousin Felicia, she's a practicing Muslim all the way. You see, David has children that has Muslim names. Now, why would all of a sudden this David turn from Muslim to Mason? It didn't add up. Okay, and then when they began to show this new Dave pictures of him, and I knew doggone well that wasn't David Chappelle. And then look at the comparison. Now, the old David, his eyes, David had semi-big eyes, but his eyes were more slanted than bulged out eyes. And David and I, we always talked about his weight. And I was, Dave, you need to get, Dave said, no, because I don't want to be big. I want to stay small. I said, well, why? Because I can run fast. I can do things fast. David never believed in being a big, husky type person. This new person here today, they have him as a big, husky type person, like a bodybuilder. His eyes are budging out of his head. His neck is as big as one of the wrestlers' necks on the WrestleMania. You see, that's not, I'm telling you, you all can believe what you want to believe, but I know what I know. The Chappelle family knows this. This is not our family member. This is not my cousin, but this new Dave that they have out, it looks nothing like the old David Chappelle. The old David, he would have like a mustache. The new Dave, they have a mustache, but like mustache, but it looks like it's painted on his face. It's not the mustache that the old David Chappelle, had. Now, when they did David, made him a clone. Now, this is the thing now. They knew that his wife and his children and his mother would know the difference. If once they cloned David Chappelle and sent this new Dave back home, they would know the difference. This is not my husband. This is not my father, and this is not my son. So what they had to do, then they made threats to David earlier about taking out his wife, his children, and his mother. They told David at one time, this was all after they asked David to quit smashing on the black race as far as the character that he was playing on the Chappelle show. And they told David, too, that if he didn't stop, they would take out his mother, they would take out his wife, they would take out his children. And so now they knew that once they cloned this Dave or David, whatever you want to call him, but I know him as David, that once he goes back to Ohio, the family would know that this is not the man. It's a man of Russia, Putin, because Putin is cloned too, whether you believe it or not, but you do your research and find out these things now here. And when Putin was cloned, his wife said, when they send him back home, she said, she got on in front of the cameras, she told everybody, this man is not my husband. She said, no, this is not my husband. This is a different man. And she saw the difference that this man had brought forth. Well, she was beginning to run her mouth a little bit too much. So what did they do? They didn't do it until Putin's wife was going to divorce Putin. And so what did they do? They cloned her. They cloned her. And now if you ask her if Putin is her husband, she'll tell you, yes, that's my husband. And if you do your research on it, you'll find statements and bulletins and that where she said at one time, that's not my husband. I don't know who this man is. This is an imposter that I'm living with. And, do your research and find out what she said. And so they figured if they sent David back home to his wife, his children, and his mother, they would say the same thing. So they had to do something. And so what they did before they sent David back home to his family, they cloned his wife, Elaine, they cloned his children, and they cloned his mama, my aunt. And they cloned all of them. And so now they were able to send David back home to them. And they don't know the difference. And you know why they don't know the difference? Because they all have been cloned. They all have been cloned. And if you go to them and ask them of the things, that I said about David, they'll look at you and say, no, something is wrong with her. She's, and they'll say this. Well, naturally, they'll say this. That's why they cloned David's wife, mother, and children, because they knew that David loved his family. And it wouldn't look right for David and all of his family to just all of a sudden, but especially his family to die or something of that nature. So they had to clone them as well. And they're living happily ever after as clones on the farm in Ohio, in Yellow Springs, Ohio. And so, and what they're doing off of this clone David, they're going to use this clone David to make money off of. Oh, they're going to push this clone David. They're going to push him and push him. They're going to make so much money off of him until they can't make enough. And once they have made enough, then they're going to kill off the clone. But you see that if you listeners out there compare the original David to this new David, the original David, Chappelle, made people, this man, the original was funny. I mean, he was fun. He would tell jokes to me and I would just laugh like that. But now this new clone, he's not as funny as the old David is. There are things that the old David did this new David doesn't even do. He doesn't. And if you listen, but you have to listen closely to this clone's voice. I'm telling you, listen very closely. This new clone does not, because I've picked it up and several other Chappelle family members have picked it up. This new clone does not have the original tone voice that David Chappelle had.